name is Frans Murto, and I'm with the Data Science and Analytics department at WISOG, and I'll be talking about position value models. I'll first give a brief overview on what expected threat and possession value models actually mean, and then present our own possession value model and show some examples of how it works in action. So, what is expected threat anyway, and what are possession value models? Simply put, they're models that estimate how dangerous a given situation or action is in a game. Each type of possession value model is more or less based around a set of actions for which transition probabilities and rewards are derived from data. And this is done for all game states. And those who are familiar with mathematics, this basically describes a Markov decision process. The pioneer for these kinds of models was Sarah Rudd's work on Markov chains back in 2011. But what really popularized the possession value model was expected threat, which was introduced in 2019 in a blog post by Karun Singh. And while the XT model itself is a very simple model, it only considers passes and moves, the name itself is quite catchy, and people started to refer to different kinds of position value models by the name ever since. And benefits of possession value models are quite obvious. We can estimate the value of each action directly. We don't have to be reliant on metrics derived from shots or expected goals. We can value actions that happen earlier in the build-up. We can value actions that create scoring chances that never result in shots, and so on. And if we look at the previous work done on possession value models, most of it is in soccer, and published work in the domain of ice hockey in this regard is quite scarce. And pretty much everyone has their own way of calculating a possession value. The window, the way the game states or the game surface is discretized, what kind of data they use, so on. And our possession value model is a framework of gradient boosted trees. We train it on 2 seasons worth of regular season data from Liga. This is around 900 games, and during training we split the data so that the training, validation and testing sets do not have data from overlapping matches, so that the model does not capture match-specific trends. The actions we consider are moving, passing, shooting, and dump ins and dump outs. And the window we use to derive the scoring probabilities is the next 8 seconds following an event. Since the models have really low inference time, this means that we can estimate the possession values in near real time. Latency is approximately half a second. We also model risk separately from reward, so each action, with the exception of shots, has both a scoring for and a scoring against probability. And an individual action, the possession value is determined by these scoring for and scoring against probabilities and weighting them with the success or failure probability. And the total possession value is the sum of these individual action possession values weighted by an overall action probability, which refers to the likelihood that a player performs a particular type of action in a certain game state. Also, we extend the estimation into situations where clear-cut possession is not established, since there are many situations where the team may not be in controlled possession, but the probability of scoring is relatively high. For example, goal-mouth scrambles. So we assign credit for the possession to the closest player of the offensive team, and until we can conclusively determine that a player is in control of the puck, we maintain this situation. And regarding the data features we have the basic tracking data stuff, position, angle, velocity, direction, relation to teammates and opponents, but we also have some advanced features to capture high-level information. For example, we model pressure as a function of the surface of the rink, and we consider the position, velocity and direction of the opponents, and we can calculate the pressure value for any position on the ice. Similarly, we determine the influence the opponents have on each pass lane, as well as the maximum width of the pass lane. And for offensive and defensive structures, we force the team positions into two lines using hierarchical clustering. And usually these two lines are the forward line and the defensive pairing, but really it can be any combination of players. And we derive things like the area, the disruption, distance to the cluster centers, where the players are positioned in relation to the overall shape and structure of the team. And for goalies, we determine things like the angle of the goalie towards the net, how deep the goalie is positioned, what is the distance the goalie has to cover to make a save against a particular opponent, is the visibility of the goalie blocked, and if it is, by how much, and whether there's an active screen in front of the goalie. And for the action probability model, we include game state variables like man advantage and score difference. Now to look at the individual components of the model, we derive moves from tracking data by splitting the puck control sequences into 1 second length pseudo events, and we determine the end position by projecting the player trajectory by 1 second. And a move is considered to be successful if the player maintains possession or makes a play. Doesn't really matter if it's a pass that gets intercepted or a dump in, as long as the player doesn't lose the possession or get driven or checked into the boards or something like that. And to the right we have some model metrics, and these models perform pretty well considering the difficulty of the learning task. And something to consider is that since we're modeling the difficulty and scoring probability of the actions separately, there are some features we need to be careful about including into the scoring probability models, as the models may capture the signal of pass or move or dump in difficulty and get biased towards 0 because of this, and we don't really want that. So we keep some variables separate, even though the model metrics themselves may be a bit worse because of this. But if we weight the scoring probabilities with the success probability, then the resulting metrics for AUC and player skill score are better than the individual models. And for passes, we calculate the individual value for each pass. We also weight it with an extra receiver probability, which refers to the likelihood that the player is the target of the pass. And the total pass value for the player in possession is the weighted sum of all individual passes. Note that all these events are basically the average decision in that situation, which means that execution matters. The player may pass the puck into space or produce a really crisp pass that's easy to shoot, or the pass might fail. Anything can happen, and we define the added possession value by subtracting the total possession value at the end of the event compared to the possession value total at the start of the event. And this way we can determine who exceeds the expectation. And for shots, we basically have a expected goals model with added tracking data features, and we assume there's no risk and immediate reward in shots. And well, this of course isn't completely accurate. The probability that a blocked shot results in a turnover or a missed shot that leads to a zone exit and a giveaway and possibly counterattack is obviously not zero, but these are future considerations for now. And the final component, which is, well, final two components, dump ins and dump outs. We estimate the recovery probability for each player on the field, if applicable, and similarly the scoring for and scoring against probabilities if they were the first player to reach the puck, and the weighted sum of these probabilities is the total sum for a dump in and a dump out. Now, since we've chosen the 8-second window, the reward tends to be quite low for dump ins, since coming out successfully out of board battle after a dump in or performing a successful forecheck usually takes longer than that, and dump outs generally are a defensive strategy, so the reward isn't very high, and in the context of this model they're more interesting from a risk management perspective and what kind of decisions the player makes under pressure, for example, or crossing the neutral zone, things like that. Now we can look at some examples of how the model works with real data streams. There are no fancy visualizations in these clips, as they're taken straight from our raw data testing environment, and since we're short on time, we're not going to look at every component, but I think some of the more interesting offensive play-related components. For the first example, we have the player in possession behind the net. The two values above him represent the total pass and move expected values, which are the two best actions the player can take at this time. And for all other players, the three numbers represent the pass receiver probability, pass success probability, and the scoring for probability, or what is the likelihood that if the player receives the pass at this moment in time, then the team will score in the next 8 seconds. Now here, the only really viable pass target is the player to the right, which is the player that eventually receives the pass, but the pass itself is really clever. Here, the player passes into space, and the resulting scoring chance is pretty high. The estimated probability of the shot is 18%, but the goalie saves it. Now for the second example, the player in possession is to the left. He is moving across the offensive zone, protecting the puck while the opponent is pressuring him. Now the overall possession value here is very high, and the player turns around, the defenseman is in space. Here the success probability of the pass decreases a bit because of the closest forechecker approaching the puck pretty quickly here. Anyway, he completes the pass. Now here the defenseman finds the other defenseman who's snuck up the ice close to goal in a good scoring position. Also the other two players are viable pass targets here, but if the probability to complete the pass is so low, then there's really only one good passing option here. Now the pass succeeds, the player receives the puck in front of the goalie, he takes the round, scores the goal, and the final probability for the shot is estimated to be around 30%, so a very high scoring chance. Now the third example is a controlled breakout from the defensive zone. Here the three values above the player's head are move, pass and dumping probabilities, action probabilities, and here you can see that the receive probability isn't actually weighted so that, or isn't actually normalized so that the probability is sum up to 1. This is because there are situations where the receiving probability is low for all players, and if you normalize those values, then there are some instabilities in the resulting pass expected values. Now here, pretty much all players are viable passing targets at this moment, but as the player approaches the neutral zone and the opponent sets up the trap, the success probability for each player decreases and the probability to dump the puck in increases, and the player eventually dumps the puck in at around 20% chance to dump. So the next example is a clean breakaway. Here the shot and move possession values are unweighted. This is because we show the action probability in the parentheses next to them, and pretty much what you'd expect to happen here is that as the player approaches the goal, the probability to shoot increases and the probability to move decreases, and yeah, we see that the final shot estimation is around 31%. The goalie saves the shot. 31% is approximately the average scoring rate for a breakaway in Liga. And yep. The final example here, 2-on-1 attack. Here we have the weighted pass values and move values again. Here we can see that the pass success probability decreases as the opponent approaches the puck carrier and the back checker manages to close up the passing line a bit, but eventually the carrier threads the needle, executes a great pass, and his teammate one-times it in to score the goal, and the final probability of the shot is around 24%, so another high quality scoring chance. That's it for the examples, and regarding future work, we're looking to create advanced metrics based on these possession values. Necessarily things like how much value a player adds with his actions in total, as well as by component, and maybe things like a passing profile, how a player changes his decisions, passing decisions under pressure, how risky are his decisions, so on. We could also evaluate the off-the-puck pass reception threat using these models, but they could also be their own models. And similarly to the move, we could extract keep as a separate action from the tracking data. for those moments where the player in possession waits for his teammates to move into better positions, better passing lanes, so on. And finally, the, I think, most exciting future possibility is to use pose estimation to determine the accurate orientation of players and their sticks, since we can't really determine the accurate player orientation based on pure tracking data, and knowing whether a player is ready to receive a pass, ready to shoot, if the stick is tight or not, if they're off balance or not. It's really going to improve the estimation capability of these models, and we actually have a computer vision model at this moment that can estimate the player orientation and stick position from a video stream. We still need to scale it up to apply it to all of our matches, so that'll be in the future. And that's it. Thank you for listening, and I'll be glad to answer any questions you have.
Frans, can you hear us? Are you online?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Very well. Okay, I'll ask for questions from the room. Dave?
Hey, Frans. Thanks for the talk. Very interesting. So I noticed you in like the first or second slide, you kept within the realm of Markov decision processes. Does that mean, and I think you mentioned it in the future work, does that mean the model just kind of operates as like a single player / agent and it's not player specific?
Yeah, that's correct.
Cool. Do you in the future, do you intend to kind of build out player specific models?
We haven't really thought about that avenue currently. We're really focusing. Well, we want to get the thing I talked about at the end of the presentation, the stick and player orientation, to improve the overall accuracy of the model before we branch out to make any player specific modeling decisions.
Yeah, I had a question about the window that you're looking at. You actually referred to the work of the Schulte group. And if I remember well, they used reinforcement learning where every action leading up to a goal actually gets a value. And there was this older work by Michael Schuckers that has a window of 20 seconds towards a goal. So the choice of the window of 8 seconds, how was it motivated? How did you get to that number?
So we tested several different windows. The 8-second window seemed to be a good balance between the short and long-term rewards. Increasing the window to say 50 seconds diluted the signal a bit. Also, the model metrics started to deteriorate at that point, but really there's no advanced theory behind it. We just charged it to be, or charged it to provide the best results based on our domain expert eye tests. And yeah.
Okay, it's the usual trial and error and checking out that the model works. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah, Dave?
So the action space included movement, and I kind of picked up later in the talk that was just movement by the puck carrier.
Yeah.
Is that at every second that the puck carrier has the puck, are they expected to be taking movement actions?
Not necessarily, but as I mentioned, the keep action or adding that would I guess discriminate the action space better, since the player doesn't actually need to, or the move action itself doesn't include stopping or waiting with the puck. So that's I guess a deficiency at the moment. But there are some situations where the move probability is expected to be 0. For example, the controlled breakout example, until the other players started moving forward there, the move probability was around 0. So there are some situations where the model evaluates that the probability is probably next to nothing.
Anything else? Thanks a lot, Frans, for being with us. And thanks again from the audience